Hey guys, it's Sam for Digital Meet again, and in this Cinema 4D tutorial we're going to be looking at creating so-called magic portal, magic door effect, sometimes called impossible space and also known as non-Euclidean space. So this is a post that I saw in a group that I belong to on Facebook. Someone posted this up, and let's get rid of this. And this is the kind of effect that he came up with. Now, someone in the comments actually asked, oh, how did you achieve this? And his answer was, basically, I did 2 render passes and then composited them in post. And the person that asked the question, how did you achieve this, then said, I wonder if this is possible as a straight 3D shot. And that got me thinking, could you get something like this out of say Cinema 4D without having to do any external compositing? And this is what I came up with. This is just on my Instagram, and this is just a straight render straight out of Cinema 4D. There was no external compositing involved, and that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do today. So let's get rid of this and just get cracking. So I'm going to create a cube, and I'm going to have that sit on the floor as well. And we're going to crunch this down in the Z, so we've got a thin frame here. And then I'm going to select, well, first of all, I'm going to make this editable, select the front and back faces of this. And then we're going to go to Inset, so right click and go to, if I can find it, Extrude Inner, there we go. And then pull that in like this. I think that should do us fine. And then what we can do is delete that, and then we can press UL to get our loop selection, and press return to get into edge mode. Select this edge, shift select this, and then we've got these edges selected. And then I'm going to right click, go into stitch and sew, and then I'm going to hold the shift key and drag this point to this point. And there we go. Something else I'm going to do is, and this is a little feature, well, not a feature, this is a little quirk of the stitch and sew tool. I'm going to choose my polygons and select all, and as you can see, this where I've stitched and sewed, this is reversed normal. So Control A to select all the polys, right click and say align normals, and now they should all be facing the right way. Something else I'm going to do, just to add a little bit of, I don't know, just so it's not so hard, I'm going to select this ring here. That was UL again, by the way, for loop mode, and shift select this. So these are selected. In fact, we could probably do the same for the, yeah, let's just select everything. In fact, Control A, and then we'll go to our bevel tool, and I'm just going to put a little bit of a bevel on these, and the mitering I'm going to make, actually it doesn't matter in this case, but I'm going to turn up the subdivision, so we've got a 3, that should do us. Yeah, well, the subdivision's actually 2, but you get 3 segments. Okay, so that'll do. That just rounds off the edges for us. And something else I'm going to do is create a material, open this up, and we're going to call this frame. And let's make this white. And in the reflectance, I'm going to get rid of this specular, and I'm going to add a Beckman layer Fresnel dielectric, and that'll do us for now. And we can add this to our frame. And just in the name of keeping things tidy, I'm going to rename our cube in the Object Manager to Frame. Okay, so now we've got our frame sorted out. Let's go to our content browser actually, and I think in presets, if we go to example scenes, features, there we go, and I think it's in rendering, there's a head that I like to use quite often. Here he is. So I'm going to drag this into our scene. There he is, and I'm going to get rid of anything that we don't need here. So these nulls can say bye-bye. We don't need the lashes at all. And in fact, let's, in our scene, get our display mode changed to ground shading lines so I can see what kind of stuff we've got going on. We can get rid of this material as well. We won't need that. And the lights and the camera, because we're going to be setting our own up. So the head here, I think we can just make this editable. So we've just got a head object. That'll do us fine. And then we can get rid of this null. So now we've got a frame and a head. And with the head selected, I'm just going to go to Mesh, Axis, and then Execute. And it just makes sure the axis is right in the middle of the head there. And then I'm going to scale this down so it actually fits within our window. Something like this. And I'm just going to set that on the floor. There we go. We've got a bit of a better idea about scale as well now. Okay, so that should, I think that'll do us. I think we're fine with that, and we can get rid of these materials as well that were created when we brought the head in. And I'm just going to make another material. Again, let's call this head. And again, let's give this a color. I'm going to make this red. And I'm going to get rid of our specular in the reflectance layer, add a new Beckman and dielectric, and that'll do us. Bit rough and ready, I know, but it serves the purpose of this scene. Okay, now we're going to need a floor for all of this to sit on, so let's create a floor object. There we go. And again, let's create another material. In the reflectance, I'm actually just going to clear that. In fact, we can just turn that off. And in the color, I'm going to make this a yellow. So something like this, that'll do. And we'll put that on the floor. And there we've got our floor. Okay, cool. All right, let's give this a render. Yeah, not the prettiest in the world. We're going to also need a background as well. So let's grab a background, bring that down here, and we can put this on the, in fact, I think if you drag the material on, it automatically sets the projection type to frontal because it knows it's going on a background object. And now when we render, we get this. So you can see the seam at the horizon. And we can fix this by right-clicking on the floor, going down to Render Tags and Compositing, and we can say that this is a compositing background. We can switch that on. And now when we render, it should blend the floor and the background together. Okay, there we go. I'm going to now create a path for our camera to move around. So I'm going to create a circle there. I'm going to change its orientation so it's laying on the floor. We're probably going to want to lift this up a little bit as well. And we're going to need a camera. So there's the camera. And we're going to need to align this camera to this spline. So right click on the camera. Camera tags, I think it's animation tags actually. Align to spline. And then we can drag our circle spline into this spline path. And now you'll see that our camera is sitting on our spline. And we can animate its position around like this. Now, we want the camera to be in looking at a particular place. Before we do that, I'm just going to actually change the radius of our circle so it's a little bigger. Now, we want the camera to always be looking at the sort of middle of the frame, really. So again, what I'm going to do is choose our frame. And I think, yeah, everything's in the center, so we don't need to center that up. What I'm going to do is right-click on the camera, and I think it's in animation tags. Yeah, there we go, target. So this is a target tag on the camera, and in the target object, I'm going to pull the frame. So this camera is always looking at the center of the frame. And if we go into our camera now, you'll see that this is what it looks like. Let's also go to our position tag. So yeah, that's the kind of thing we got. All right. Now the camera is still a little bit close to our object. In fact, what I might do is go to the object tag of the camera and change this to a more wide angle so it kind of pulls it out a little bit. And yeah, that's all good. So let's go to the align to spline tag. Now at position 0, you're kind of looking at this side on. So what I'm going to do is grab the circle and actually rotate it. And in fact, we can be in the camera when we do this because the thing's in the middle. So we can actually do it at something like this. So that's its starting point now. And now what I'm going to do is go to the position, keyframe it at 0, bring our time all the way to the end, and bring this to 100%, and click position again. So now we've got 2 keyframes. But if you play this, you'll notice that it speeds up and then slows down, and that's because the keyframes by default have like an ease in, ease out. So we can change that to make sure that it's linear. So if we right click on the camera and go down to show tracks, it'll bring up the tracks for anything to do with our camera, including the align to spline tag, and we can select that and just hit this linear curve here, and now it should just loop and be a constant speed all the way through. So let's come out of this. We've kind of got everything set up. I think we might still need to adjust our circle slightly, and also I think just to add a little point of interest, I'm going to raise the circle up as well so it pulls our camera up and changes kind of changes our view. Yeah, I think that could be okay. Like I said, it's a bit rough and ready, and you can set this up as you wish. I think the camera is a little too close to our frame as well, so maybe think about pulling that back slightly. So let's grab the circle and increase the radius of this. Okay, there we go. That'll do us for now. Yeah, that'll do nicely. Okay, get back to the beginning. And this is the kind of thing we're looking at. Now, I'm going to create another cube. And let's come out the camera. And I'm going to have this sit on the floor as well. And now I'm going to create the inside of this room. So let's pull this back a little bit. Like so. And I'm just going to shrink this down. I'm going to go into the scale tool. And we don't want this to be clipping with the frame or anything like that. So I'm just going to pull this down slightly. So we've got something like this. Okay, so let's make this cube editable. Let's go into the selection mode and the polygon mode and delete this front face here so we can see into this. And I also want to make sure that our head as well isn't intersecting with the floor of this. So I'm just going to hide our actual floor object so I can look underneath, and as you can see it is intersecting. So let's pull this up slightly. There we go, that's better. And I think this may be a little bit too big as well. Now we've got our little box in there, so let's shrink this down a little bit more. And let's just make sure that's sitting on this, or something like that. And I forgot to name this yellow material, so let's go ahead and do that as well. So let's call this floor. And we're also going to need to create a new material. And I'm going to call this inside room, something like that. That'll do. And let's make the color for this our digital meat colors for argument's sake. And again, I'm just going to get rid of the reflectance. And we'll put that on there. Now we have something like this. This is what we've got. Now we've got all that, I'm going to need to set up some lighting. But before I do that, I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping. So this cube, this is the inside room. Let's do that. And now I'm going to start organising things, because we're going to need to know what things are, because, well, you'll see in a minute. But before I set up some lighting, I want to make sure that this is organised a little bit better. So I'm going to create a null. and I'm going to call this null scene, and this is basically just going to hold general scene objects, general arbitrary stuff. Well, not arbitrary, but you know. So the camera can go in here, and the camera path, in fact I'm going to name this camera path as well so we know what it is. So they're fine in there, and the floor and background could go into these scene objects, but I'm not going to put them in there actually. I'm going to create another null, and it'll be evident why I'm doing this in a minute. So I'm going to call this inside elements. Okay, so that'll include the inside room, that'll also include the head. So yeah, okay, I think the rest can go in outside elements then. So let's make another null, and let's call this outside elements. There we go, and our background can go in there, and so can our floor, and so can our frame. Okay, so now we've got three nulls now, and we've organised it a little bit better. Okay, let's make another null, and we'll call this lights for the time being. Okay, so let's create some lights. I'm going to create a PBR light. And there we go, it's created a light there. I'm also going to come out of our camera as well. In fact, I should lock this camera, although it shouldn't move because it's on a path, so maybe we don't need to worry about that. So this first light then, I'm going to call this top light. And I'm going to rotate this so it's facing down, like this, and I'm going to put it at a 90-degree angle, and we can also go into this light's properties, its details here, and increase its outer radius so it's a bit bigger, so something like this, and let's just call this 300, and then I'm going to move this up, and in fact, just so this scene's not so messy, now we've set up our camera path, we can hide that, and we can actually hide the camera as well. We don't need to be seeing them. Okay, so this is going to be above. Excellent stuff. And this top light I'm going to give a slightly blue hue, so maybe something like this. Okay, now we've got that, I'm going to create another PBR light, and I'm going to increase its size by, I don't know, let's make this 100. Yeah, so we've got something like this. I'm just going to move it back. And we should probably give it a target. So I'm going to make this top light's target. Sorry, not the top light, this new light that I've just created. Let's call this left light, this one. Oh, left light. Okay, let's right click on this, animation tag, target, and we're going to make the target of this light the head. So let's drag the head into this, and it should always face the head now. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is drag this up so it's like this, and in fact let's turn on world coordinates, and then we can go to our top view. So it's this far away, and we're going to put that somewhere like this, maybe in the corner there. And let's copy this, and we'll call this light right light. And we can just pull this across and put it in the other corner here. So now this is our kind of lighting setup we've got here. Now I don't want these lights to appear in the render, because obviously when the camera spins round you might see them. So I think there's a setting. If we choose our top light, there should be a setting somewhere. Here we go, showing render. So I'm going to turn that off, and the same should be true for these lights as well. So now if we were to render while looking directly at these, they don't show up. which is good. Okay, now you'll notice that these lights are shining on the front, so this is obviously going to get enough light. It'll also get shadowing and all the rest of it. Don't worry about the quality, we're going to sort that out shortly. But at the back here, it's completely black. It's not quite getting anything. Now what I like to do, and it's kind of to fake bounce light, I like to create a point light. And let's bring that down here as well. And I'm going to call this global light, because that's effectively what it's going to be. Now, at the moment, it's just a point light, but if we select this and go into its general settings, we've got an option here for ambient illumination. And what that means is it disregards surfaces that may block light rays coming from it. It just lights the scene uniformly, basically. So let's turn this on. And you can see if I turn this up and down, you can see that it's just lighting uniformly. And even though it's in this position, in fact, it's inside the geometry. That has no bearing. So if we come to the back now, and I turn this all the way down to 0, you can see that this is, black. And it is in the render as well. But if I start cranking this up, it starts to lighten that a little bit. And it kind of simulates bounce light a little bit. So yeah, I reckon 40% is okay. I'm actually going to go into the camera and actually start setting these lights up a little bit better. So let's turn these down to 0, and in fact let's turn off our global light for now. So let's crank up our top light to maybe, I don't know, 60%. Give it a render. I'm just trying to sort of get a general feel for the scene. It'd probably be better if I looked at the top of this. Okay, so that's let's crank this up to 80. In fact, I think when I did this scene before, I think everything was fine at maybe 100%, but okay, that's not bad. And then this global light. Turn it on, that might help. Yeah, it kind of just sort of fills out the inside of that box so it's not so black, and creates kind of like a bounced light effect. Now we can always tweak these as we go along, so it's not the end of the world if it doesn't look perfect. So let's get back in our camera and let's have a look at our render settings, because that is pretty horrendous in there when it comes to the shadow quality and everything. So I'm using physical render for this, and as you can see, it's just a 16 by 9, 1920 by 1080. That's fine. We can leave it at that. 24 frames a second. I prefer that. I think it looks more cinematic. And let's go to the physical settings. So we can see the shading error threshold is on 15%. Let's crank that down to 12. The blurriness subdivision, well, we haven't actually got any blurriness in the scene at the moment, but I'm going to crank that up to 3 anyway. The shadow subdivision, however, let's put that at 4, and we can leave everything else as is for the time being. And there we go. That's actually really smoothed out that shadow there. Okay, so let's put our lights in our lights thing. Close this up. Now, this is the problem. When we render this, we don't want to see this room. And we certainly don't want to see the head outside of this frame either. Now, this is where I started thinking, how could we go about this? I knew it was going to involve the compositing tag, but I didn't know how I was going to go about this. At first I thought maybe I could do it with a shader, maybe with the normal direction. That didn't help. So yeah, I came to the compositing tag, and this is why I created inside elements and outside elements. So let's get a compositing tag on inside elements. So that'll be render, compositing. Now we've got some options here. We can say, okay, does it cast shadows? Is it seen by the camera? And all that kind of thing. And what I ended up doing was utilizing this seen by transparency. I thought, okay, what if we say it's not seen by transparency, the inside objects? Well, then I'm probably going to need a transparent object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another box, and I'm going to have this sit on the floor. I'm also going to come out of our camera again so we can work. And I'm going to pull this back, and I'm going to make it slightly smaller than the frame again, but not as small as the room. I'm going to make it slightly bigger than the room, like so. But I'm also going to make it editable, and I'm going to remove the front face of this, because obviously we want to see into this box. Now let's get back in our camera. And obviously that doesn't do anything for us if we rendered, it just does this. Something else that should be noted, I don't really want this touching the floor either, and I don't think it is. No, it's not. It clears it slightly. Okay, so now I'm going to need to make a material for this. So let's create a material, and I'm going to call this transparent. I'll just call it transparent, that's fine. And maybe spell transparent properly as well. Okay, so it doesn't need any reflection, so it certainly doesn't need any color, but it needs transparency. Now, as you can see, this has got an index of reflection, and that's no good for us, because if we applied this to the box, you're still going to see this box via refraction, and you can see that here by this sort of, you can see the outer edge of it. And so if we go into transparency, you can see it's got a refraction preset of glass. Now we want it to match air, so that would be a value of 1, and now you can see in the preview that it's not visible. Okay, so now when we render, it appears that it's not there. Okay, so I'm going to choose this, and I'm going to call this transparent blocker, or let's just call it transparent blocker for the intents and purposes of this tutorial. I'm sure there's a better name for it, and I'm going to put this in our scene as well. Okay, so with that said, then what we can do now is we can composite based on transparency. So these inside elements that this is on, I can say they're not seen by transparency, and because the transparency only exists in this area, you will only not see these elements within that area. So now that that's turned off, we can give this another render, and lo and behold, it hides our object, which is great. Now you notice the frame is a little bit bright, so I think we do need to adjust our lighting slightly. So let's turn off the global light and see if we get an effect. Yeah, I think maybe the front two lights are a bit too strong. Well, first of all, as well, I'm going to tint these. So I'm going to make our left one have a slight red tint, and I'm going to make our right one have a slight orange tint. Just for that. Let's give it a render now and see if it's still too bright. Yes, in my opinion, it's still too bright. So I think we're going to bring these down so they're not 100%, maybe 85%, something like that. That's better. We can actually start to see a little bit of, pick out a little detail, and I'm going to bring this down even more to 75%. Yeah, that's a lot better. It's not so blown out. And the top light, that's at 70%. And now we can start playing with our global light. There we go. That's not too bad, actually. I think I can live with that. Okay. So now we can see that this is hidden. But even though our transparency box is hiding our inside elements via this transparency, it's still casting shadows. Now we both want it to cast shadows and not want it to cast shadows, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Obviously behind the box we don't want these shadows on the floor, because effectively, Cinema 4D had a little moment there. There we go. Effectively these shadows shouldn't exist behind the frame, because there should be no inner box to cast these shadows from the outside world. But we still want these shadows that are inside the box. So we're kind of in a interesting place, because if we say turn cast shadows off, great, we eliminate these shadows on the floor. Sorry, looks like Cinema 4D's having another moment. Might be a driver issue. Yeah, we can see we've eliminated these shadows on the floor, but now we've got none of those lovely shadows within the box either. So what are we going to do? Well, the thing that I came up with was actually duplicating our lights. And this is why, another reason it's important to make our inside elements and outside elements. So these lights, I'm going to call outer lights, okay? And in fact, I'm going to call these outer elements as well, just to keep everything the same. And let's call, yeah, okay. So these are our outer lights. I'm going to make a copy of these, and I'm going to call these our inner lights. Okay. Inner lights. Okay. Now you're probably thinking, why are you doing this? Well, if we choose our top light and go to project, we've got this mode, exclude or include. I'm actually going to switch this to include. In fact, I'm going to do that for all of our lights in inner lights as well. And in fact, I'm going to take our global light and put that in our scene, because our global light will just apply to everywhere. And then I'm going to delete it out of our outer lights as well. So let's get back to our inner lights. Choose all of these lights really. Go to project. I'm going to choose include. Remember, this is our inner lights. So I'm going to grab our inside elements and drag these into our inside our inner lights. Okay, let's call this inner elements as well, just so we've got parity. Okay, so our inner lights have now got all of the inner elements as an include there. So these lights will only illuminate these inner elements. And let's do the same with the outer lights. Let's grab all of these and then grab our outer elements and put them in there. So this set of lights is lighting the outside. This set of lights is lighting the inside. Okay, cool. All right, let's give it another render. Now it appears our frame is not being lit, and I want to know why. Okay guys, I'm an idiot. Our outer lights, if I select these, I didn't change the mode to include. I put exclude, so it's actually excluding the outer elements, and if I turn it into include, you can see that everything's lit now. So the outer lights are lighting the outer elements, the inner lights are lighting the inner elements. And if we render now, the lighting looks exactly as it did before, but now we're not getting any of that horrible shadowing on the floor now. So we could render this out now, and we'd have this effect where we have our box spinning around. But that's not the end of this story. I thought to myself, okay, well that's a good way to do it, and it gives us the effect we want. We've got our head within our frame, and obviously you can't see the head outside of, you know, that frame. It's just inside our little box room, so we've got like an impossible space there. But I thought, okay, well we're kind of limited to this box here. What if we wanted a larger world inside of this instead of just this box? So that's when I started thinking about other ways we could do this. So let's actually set that up. Okay, so these inner elements, I'm going to get rid of the room completely. And the transparent blocker as well. I thought, well, we don't want to be confined by this transparent blocker. So what I ended up coming up with was saying, okay, well, instead of saying that things through transparency aren't visible, what if we flip it and say that things through transparency are visible? So with that in mind, let's come out the camera and let's go to our selection tool and polygon mode and actually just start deleting these polys. Let's get rid of all of these, so we're just left with the back face poly here. And I'm actually going to flip the normal so it's facing the correct way as well. where is it? Reverse normal, there we go. And I'm also going to make sure that the pivot for the mesh is actually in the middle of our new plane as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this forward so it's sitting sort of in between. Let's have a look at our top view here, and then we can make sure it's sat in the middle, something like this. And I'm also going to go to the front view as well, because I want to make sure that it's in the middle of our, there we go. There we go. So not too interesting. And now we've got an effect like this. So it's actually doing the opposite of what it was doing before, which is hiding everything within the frame and showing it out the frame. So we need to actually flip this now. So in the compositing tag, we need to actually turn on scene by transparency. Okay, so now it's seen within this transparent stuff, this transparent window that we've basically created, but we don't want it to be seen outside of it. And we can do that by saying scene by camera. We can just turn that off. So now it's the complete reverse of what we had before, which is now this. But we're not confined by the box that this head lived in. So now what we can do is, and remember, the inner lights are showing the inner elements. So anything that we want to be lit by that stuff has to be inside. So now what I can do is I can actually create a second floor. So this floor object here, I can create a floor for inside. So let's call this inner floor. And just for naming sake, outer floor. Okay, and for our inner floor, I'm going to get rid of this material and I'll put our blue one on. And let's see what we get now. There we go. Now, we've got a problem. We've got a problem. The reason we've got a problem is because we've still got the compositing tag on this floor object. So if I take that off, that should only be, it should take on the characteristics of this compositing tag up here, which it does. Now we've got some other issues going on, and we can sort these out. This inner floor, it does need a compositing tag. So let's put a compositing tag on there. Render, compositing, and we want to say composite with background. Now, something that should be noted here, you can only have one background in a Cinema 4D scene. If you put two in there, what it does is it only takes notice of the first background within a hierarchy. And in Cinema 4D, that works from top to bottom. So we're going to have to overcome that in a sec, but let's deal with this floor issue first. We've got compositing tag on it now, and we've said, you know, scene by camera and scene by transparency. So this is going to actually override the tag of the object that it's in. Okay, so if we render, okay, the floor looks normal now, but uh-oh, we've got this. So we need to match our original tag. Sorry, so this inner floor one, we need to turn off scene by camera and make sure scene by transparency is on. And we also want the compositing background on. So now we should have something like this. There we go. That's exactly what we were looking for. But another issue we've got is that we can see the background through our thing here. So what are we going to do? Well, even though we can't have another background in this, we can have a sky object. But the problem with that is if we make a sky object, it's going to override the reflections for the scene. Okay, well, we want this to merge with the blue background, so let's create a sky, and I'm going to put that in inner elements because it is an inner element, and I'm going to call this blue sky. Okay, and I'm going to put the blue material on it. We won't worry about the reflections too much for now. And on the blue sky, we're going to say, again, a compositing tag. In fact, I don't think we're going to need a compositing tag. This one should take care of it because it's inside. So it's not seen by the camera, but it is seen by transparency. Let's give it a render and test whether that's true or not. It is, so that's good. and our floor. Now, you might be confused because you're like, oh, well, that's actually blending. And, oh, you can see that it's actually overriding the sky outside. So maybe it does need its own compositing tag. So let's get a compositing tag on that. And we'll say it's not seen by camera, but it is seen by transparency. So that should sort us out. There we go. So that's the effect that we want. And you'll notice that actually that our floor inside is actually blending with the sky. And you're probably thinking, well, why is that? And it's because this inner floor, we've said composite with background, and it's actually compositing with this background. And you might be thinking, well, this background's yellow and this one's, and the floor here is blue. So why is it still compositing? And it's because it's got nothing to do with the color. It's got to do with its brightness and its saturation. Basically, it's more to do with the brightness value. So it's kind of working on a grayscale value. So it really doesn't matter about the color. It just needs to match its brightness. So that's why it's still working. So it's still referencing this thing, this background. So let's spin around so we can see a bit more. Now, the reflections, we're still getting them from the lights because obviously we've got inner lights and outer lights and it's still getting its reflections from there. But what about environmental reflections? It looks a bit dull now. Well, what we can do, we can actually put a second sky in. There's nothing to say that we can't do that. So if I put this sky in and say, I don't know, reflection sky. And again, we can put another compositing tag on this, and we can say that it's not seen by the camera, and there's no compositing, and it's not seen by transparency either, but it's seen by everything else. We can now put a material on this. So let's create a material. Let's turn this off, all of this off, and turn on the luminance. Let's say sky. In fact, let's call it a reflection sky so we know what we're talking about. Excellent. And let's go to the content browser, and I'm going to select presets, search, oh, wrong button, search, HDR, and we've got a load of maps here. What's going on here? Right, okay, let's mic this up so we can see what we're doing. For some reason, Cinema 4D arranges these like this until you close the browser window and reopen them, and then you get this kind of tiled layout. So sometimes it needs a kick in the arse so you can view things properly. I suppose at this stage this really doesn't matter, but okay, I'm going to choose this. That'll do. Overcast. And we can drag that into this luminance channel. And now this can go on our sky, and you'll notice that the reflections on our head changed. Okay. And there we have it. Okay. So now we've got the same kind of thing as we had before, but we're not limited by the box that it lived in, which is great. So now we can do all kinds of stuff. So in our inner elements, what we could do is create a cone, which is what I did last time actually. Have this sit on the floor, and I'm just gonna shrink this down. So it's something like this, and I'm gonna put this in a cloner object. So let's create a cloner. Let's put this in our inner elements, and I'm gonna put the cone inside the cloner, and let's select this cloner and say this is a grid array, something like this. And let's come out of our camera as well so we can actually see what's going on. And let's crank these up. So it's, I don't know, 8 by 8, that'll do. So there's lots of these. And let's bring them a bit closer together. Something like that. Okay, let's call this 80 by 80 by 80. So we got something like this. And now we can bring these back like this. And let's make another null. And I'm going to call this null effectors. And this is just, again, this is just so things are nice and laid out clean. So I'm going to select this cloner and I'm going to randomize by going to Mograph effector, random effector. I made sure I selected that while my cloner was selected, and it automatically gets added to this, where am I looking? Yeah, the cloner in the effector tab. It gets added here. Okay, so this random effector I'm going to put inside our effectors, so just so everything's nice and clean, and I'm going to say that let's randomize its movement by 100. But actually, I'm not going to randomize it on the Y at all because I want them to be sat on the same plane. But let's randomize it 200 in the X and Z directions. In fact, that's not enough. Let's go 350. That'll do for the purpose of this tutorial. Now we can see that some of them are actually intersecting, which is no good. So I'm actually going to select the cloner, go back to our Mograph and choose the push apart effector. So now this pushes these apart, and we can actually choose the radius in which they're pushed apart as well. So we can just make sure they're not touching each other. Also, I'm going to go back to our, let's put that in the effectors null. I'm also going to go back to our random effector, and let's say that this affects scale uniformly as well. So we can actually get some different sizes of these things. Let's randomize that slightly. Okay, that'll do us. Let's go back to the camera. And I'm also going to make sure that these clones are actually sat. Let's go back to this view. Here we go. Let's make sure these clones are sat on the floor and they're moved back as well. So let's make sure these cones aren't intersecting with our head at all. There we go. Perfect. Now, because they're inside this inner elements here, they should automatically be inside. Excellent. So they're inside our world here, and they're not on the outside, which is beautiful because they're only being seen through transparency because they're in our inner elements thing here. Now you'll notice that the lighting, because we've got this 3 light setup, they don't look lit very well the further back they go. Now we can actually change that, and this is something else that's pretty cool about this method. We don't have to worry about our box casting a nasty shadow and all that kind of thing, but we can actually have a different lighting system inside our window than outside it. So if we look at our outer lights, we've got this three light setup, but our inner lights, we could actually bin this. So let's get rid of our top light, our left light, our right light, and we could actually just put in a, let's have a look, like a sun or something like an infinite light. So now what we can do is put this light in our inner lights, and let's just call this a direct light. And in our includes, we can just include everything in inner elements. So that's everything in there. And let's make sure that it's not just, it's pointing down. Maybe give it a little bit of a boot this way as well. And now inside our window, we've got this kind of, it looks like there's no shadows. So let's turn those on. Shadows area. That'll do, won't it? Okay. Oh, beg your pardon. I've changed the type of light to area, not the shadows. There we go. Make sure we change the shadows to area. There we go. We're getting area shadows within this window now, but not outside. We've got these soft shadows from our PBR lights. So you can actually have different lighting setups for in and out as well. Okay, so that's that done. But something else we should note as well, when we get round to this side of the window and render, because we can still see inside elements through transparency, when we render this side, we're also getting this blue thing because we're still seeing the floor and the blue sky through transparency. Now that may be something that you don't want, and in fact in my scene that we looked at earlier on my Instagram, I just had this looking yellow, and there's a way we can do that. I mean, this may be something that you want. In fact, if I go into our inner elements, grab this cloner and grab it and copy it, what I could do is, again, let's come out of our camera, I could grab our second set of clones and actually move them this side. Remember, they're still in this inner element, so even though they're this side of the frame, we still won't see them. They'll still be hidden. But when we get round to this side, we can see these clones here. So that may be something you want to do so you can see through the back side of the portal. Now I didn't want to do that, and I thought, well, how can we solve this problem? And that is actually, we can affect our transparent material. And this is why it's important to make sure this transparent object has got its normals facing the right way. So if we go into poly mode for this transparent object and press Ctrl A, we can see that the normal direction for this plane is orange this side, which is correct. That's the orange side, and then the back side is blue. So that means that's the reverse of the normal direction. Orange is the normal direction, blue the reverse. Okay, so that's how we want it. Now in this transparent material, what we can do is we can add to the alpha. So let's turn the alpha on, go to the texture drop down and go to effects and go to normal direction. Now turn this on, well, select it. Now in this texture field, we've got normal direction. Now if you go in there, color 1, which is the positive normal, is white, meaning a value of 1, and the reverse normal is a value of 0, black. Okay, and what this means is that we can actually cut out, this alpha can cut out based on normal direction. So it's kind of like a mask for normals. So now you'll see that looking through this way, nothing's changed. Great. And then when we go around this side, we see the yellow. And you'll also notice as well, this frame is still casting shadows on the outside. And it gives quite a strange illusion because there's this whole world within this window frame. But as soon as you get to an angle like this, you realise that this world is, you know, through some kind of wormhole or whatever. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. All you need to do now is render this out, your camera animation. Something that you should note as well, actually, before I move on, to make this loop properly, you'll notice there's a slight stutter when it gets to the end. Little jolt. And that's because the first frame and the last frame, so let's go all the way to the end, are exactly the same. And that's going to be no good for us. So what you want to do is, you don't want the first and the last frame to be the same. So what you do is you select your align to spline, and you can see that the, you know, frame 0, you got a keyframe, and the last frame you got a keyframe as well. You actually want to move this keyframe away, up one. Oh yeah, there we go. So it's 4 seconds. Okay, so yeah, this should take a little longer now. There we go. But we're still getting this jolt. Boop. So what you want to do is take your timeline length and move it up by 1 frame, and then make sure that we can see all of that, and then move this keyframe up by 1. So now this keyframe exists not at 4 seconds, but 1 frame up from 4 seconds. And then you can put this back down to 4 seconds, and this shouldn't have any repeat frames. So this is the last frame, and this is the first frame, and as you can see, they're different now. So now there should be no jolt, and it should loop perfectly when you render out, and it does. There you go. Excellent. So yeah, I thought that's something interesting to look at, and that's how you can achieve this kind of portal, impossible space, non-Euclidean space effect. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial, guys. I'll see you next time. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to be notified of new tutorials. You can follow me on social media at Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram, and make sure to visit me at digitalmeet.uk where you can vote for upcoming tutorials. Thanks for watching. Bye.